Now that we've seen the array spread operator in action, I want to look at the other way we can use the spread operator. That is the object spread operator. And in my opinion, that's the more useful one. With the array spread operator, there are easy ways to not use it. For example, using concat. But with the object spread operator, there really is no great way to do what it does. So let's go ahead and play around with this. Now, in principle, it does the exact same thing. It's just the details that are different. The array spread operator allows us to create a new array, grabbing items from an existing one, and the exact same thing is true with the object spread operator. It allows us to define a new object while grabbing items from existing objects. So down below, we can mess around with that real quick by creating a const user and setting a couple properties on it. I'm going to set name equal to Jen, and I'll set age equal to 24. So we have this object, and now let's say we want to get a new object without changing user. So what are we going to do to get that done? We are first going to log it to the screen. So we'll console.log our empty object. Now let's say we want to add all of the properties from user on to this new object. Well, to get that done, we use ... to spread out user. So inside of the arrays, we spread out arrays. Inside of objects, we spread out objects. Now we're going to have a new object with two properties, name and age. The only problem is that if we go ahead and save the file, it's actually going to crash. So let's go ahead and do that. I save the file. Over here we get an error, syntax error, unexpected token, and it's pointing right towards our ... where we spread out user. Now, the array spread operator has made its way into mainstream. The object spread operator is on its way, but it's not quite there yet. So we are going to need to customize our Babel configuration in order to support this syntax. It's super useful. So we're going to go ahead and get that done. It'll just take a minute or two. The plugin that we're going to be using is going to find its way into Babel RC right alongside of transform class properties. We can find this plugin by Googling Babel object spread operator. Now we are looking for the plugin page. Right here we have that /docs plugins transform object rest spread. If we head over there, it's going to give us a little more information on the plugin, how we can install it and how we can set it up. Down below, we can see they are using the spread operator in an object just like we were using it, although ours failed. All we have to do is add this guy, which is quite a mouthful. It's pretty long. And then we just attach it to the plugins array. Step one is to actually install this. So I'm going to do that from the terminal. I can go ahead and shut down the previous dev server build and use yarn add to add it. Now remember, that's quite the mouthful. It is Babel-plugin-transform-object-rest-spread. Go ahead and double check the spelling there. There is quite a few words, and we're going to be installing the most recent version, that is 6.23.0. Now we can go ahead and add this. That is going to install the dependency, and all we need to do is list it over here in the plugins array. Right after transform class properties, I'm going to add the new one in, and remember we can leave off the Babel plugin prefix. So all we need to type is transform -object -rest-spread. So we have that in place. Now if we start up the dev server again from the terminal, that is yarn run dev server, we should no longer see that error, and we should be getting the object printing inside of the browser console. I'm going to head over there. Move over into the Expensify tab, give things a refresh now that the dev server is up. And what do we get? Right here, we get an object where we have name Jen and age 24. Now, this alone isn't particularly interesting. We are just cloning an object right there without doing anything meaningful to it. But what if we want to edit this by taking this old object user and creating a new object with the same values, but maybe we add some on? So let's go ahead and do just that. Right here, I can actually add a comma and just define other properties for this new object. For example, I can set location equal to a string like Philadelphia. Now, if I go ahead and save Redux Expensify, what do we have? We have an object with all of the old properties, and we also have the new one we just set up down below. Now we can also go ahead and actually override existing properties. So let's say that name and age both come from user, but we want to set our own age. So right here, I might set age equal to 27. If I go ahead and save this, what's going to be the result? Well, it's going to grab name and age. It's then going to add location. It's going to override age, and the end result should be an object with a name set to Jen, the age set to 27, and the location set to Philadelphia. Now, if we were to define the age before the user spread, we would actually not be overriding it. So let's put age equal to 27 up here and remove it from down below. If I do that, it's going to set the age. It is going to spread out the user object, overriding that, setting the age to 24, and the end result is the same object we had before, but instead of an age of 27, we have an age of 24. Now, this is really useful because just like we don't want to change the state array, we also don't want to actually change any of the objects that make up our Redux store. Instead, we just want to clone them, adding or overriding various values. So the object spread operator is going to be crucial to moving any further, and we're going to go ahead and start using it right now to actually set up the ability to edit an expense. So we want the user to be able to override description, note, amount, or created at. Obviously, they're not going to be able to change the ID. They're just going to be able to change the 4 values that they were originally able to set up above. This means the setup is going to look just a tiny bit different. We're going to go ahead and mess around with that by using the function before we actually create it. So that'll be a call to store.dispatch, and we're going to go ahead and edit the only expense we still have, which is the second one, because remember, we removed the first one. So we're going to dispatch something, and we're going to call a function that doesn't exist, edit expense, and we're going to pass in the necessary information. Now, what details do we need to give edit expense? Well, we really just need 2 things. First up, we need the ID of the thing we're trying to edit. So we can go ahead and pass that in, and we also need what we're trying to edit. So we're going to set up edit expense to take 2 arguments. The first one is going to be the ID, expense2.expense.id, the same format we used up above. And the second one is going to be the updates object. So on here, we can determine which ones we want to update, whether it's description, amount, note, created at, or all of them. Right here, I'm going to go ahead and just update amount for that second expense. Let's say I'm in San Francisco and coffee no longer costs $3. Let's go ahead and change that to $5. So we have this call to edit expense in place. We have the 2 arguments set up. Now we need to actually create the action generator up above. Right here, under the edit expense comment, we'll create the function const edit expense. This will get set equal to our action generator function. We're going to have our 2 arguments, our ID and our updates, neither of which need defaults. If you don't have the ID and you're not updating anything, there's no need to call it. And then we'll implicitly return an object. Now, what do we want to put on here? We're going to start off with the type, which we have to have. This one will be edit expense. Then we'll move on to the ID right here. And finally, updates. Now we have all of the information correctly set up, and we can go ahead and actually handle edit expense using the object spread operator down below. Right here, we'll kick things off with a new case, a case for the edit expense action type. When we see that, what do we want to do? We want to go through every single expense in the array, finding the match. When we find the match, we want to go ahead and correctly change the match. So I'm going to be returning a call to state.map. That's going to allow us to go through every single item. We're going to use a little bit of conditional logic to change just the one whose ID matches the action ID. Then for the other ones, we'll just return what they currently are, not changing them at all. So right here, we will pass in the updater function for each one. We have an array of expenses, so we can call the individual items expense. Then we're going to go ahead and add our condition. Now we want to check if the expense ID, so the current expense we're iterating over, has an ID equal to the action ID, the one we're actually trying to change. If they are equal, that's great. This is where we'll have the code to change them. If it's not equal and it's not the expense we're trying to edit, in the else case, we can just return expense. And this has the same effect as if we didn't do anything at all. There is no change to the expenses unless they're a match. If they are a match, we want to return a brand new object. Now this is where we're going to start using the object spread operator. We want to grab all of the properties from the existing one. So I'm going to spread out expense. We want to grab the ID. We want to grab description, note, amount, and created at. Then we just want to override the ones that they passed in. So what we're going to do is spread out action.updates. So this is saying, hey, I want to return a new object, changing this expense. I want to grab all of its existing properties. I want to override any of the ones that were passed down, and that's going to be the new value for that expense. If we go ahead and save Redux Expensify, we're actually going to be able to see this in action. So right here, we have the state from before we change it. If I dive in, we have coffee with a price of 300. If I go into the final one that printed, we're going to have the modified expense. Right here, we have coffee, we have the amount of 500. So by using the object spread operator, we have a really simple way to create that new object from an existing one and from a set of updates. Now that we have this in place, we're actually all done with the expenses reducer, and I want to start focusing on the filters reducer, which we actually haven't touched. Your job for this video is going to be to set up the reducer code and the action generator necessary to allow the user to change the text value. So as always, I will give you the call down below, and it'll be your job to actually make it work. So right here, I'm going to set up another store.dispatch call. I'm going to call a function that does not yet exist. This one can be called setTextFilter, and we're going to go ahead and call it passing in the text filter. So I might pass in either no value to clear it out, setting it equal to an empty string, or I might pass in a string value. And in this case, let's say I search for rent, returning just the expenses who have rent somewhere in either the description or note fields. I'm then going to go ahead and put a semicolon at the end, and there we have it. After I run this, I should see that under the filters object, text has now a value of rent. And if I go ahead and copy this line and paste it down below, removing the input, I should see that the text value is back to an empty string. So it's going to be your job to actually make these work. You're going to be using the object spread operator in the reducer. You are going to have a case set up. You're going to spread out the state object, and then you're just going to override the one text property. Take as much time as you need to get that done. Test your work, and when you are done, you can go ahead and click play. How'd that one go? I'm going to go ahead and kick off this process by setting up setTextFilter. That's going to be up above, right under the comment for that one. Right here, a const setTextFilter. It is going to take in the text value. If none is provided, we will set it equal to an empty string. Then we are going to implicitly return an object. Now, what do we want to put on the action object? Well, first off, we do need the type, so I'll set that up, a type equal to setTextFilter. And we also need to add on the text value. I'm just going to toss that on right here, setting text equal to the text variable. Now that we have setTextFilter in place, all we need to do is add a case for this in the filters reducer. We don't have to mention this anywhere in the expenses reducer because the expenses reducer's data isn't going to change if the text filter changes. So we're going to add a case for that down below. Right here, you needed to add a case looking for setTextFilter. When you saw that, what did you want to do? You wanted to return a new object. Remember, we don't want to change the existing one. So we're going to return a new object. We're going to grab all of the values from the current filter object. So I'm going to spread out state. Then we're going to override text by setting text equal to action.text. And there we have it. We have everything in place. And if I save the Redux Expensify application, we should be able to check this out. So if I go back 3 items, filters, text should be nothing. I then go ahead and set it equal to something. So right here, I should see that something. And I am indeed seeing a text value of rent. Finally, I wrap things up by clearing the text value. And if I open up the filters object, what do I get? I get a text value of nothing. So now we have the ability to change the text value for our filtering. And we're able to do that via the object spread operator. It's a super handy tool that allows us to create new objects from existing ones, and we're going to be using it extensively throughout the course, not just in our reducers. I'm excited to continue on adding the other cases for this reducer that is coming up next, so stay tuned and I'll see you then.